therapy speak is sabotaging your sex life. It's a self-help world, and every cousin at every fucking wedding, when you ask them, what's the key to a healthy relationship? Everyone says, communicate. Cool, love it. We need to communicate, right? That's the what, but we don't get the how. And you're trying to use this language that you think is evolved and helpful. If you keep talking and talking and talking, but it's not leading to better sex and intimacy, the problem is that the way you're communicating is perpetuating an emotional disconnection, even though it sounds nice and looks correct on the surface. The real work is not scheduling more conversations. It's actually figuring out where the disconnect is and then deciding how to address that in a spirit of collaboration. When this emotional disconnection is actually addressed, sex stops feeling like this elephant in the room and it starts feeling like this thing that you become curious about. I'm going to talk about 3 ways that therapy speak perpetuates this emotional disconnection and what to do instead so that you can actually talk about sex in a way that feels enlightening and exciting and that actually gets you the deeper intimacy that you want. By the way, I'm Danny. I am a somatic sexologist and trauma specialist working within the sapphic community. And I've done all of these communication mistakes, and now I don't. And my sex and intimacy kicks ass, and it used to suck. So let's get into it. The ways we navigate hard conversations and talk about feelings and wants and needs are way different than they have been in the past because of the rise of therapy speak. And it started out as a great thing, right? More self-awareness, recognition of different patterns we may have or our partners may have, give us more access to doing things differently when we understand what's happening. But it has taken a nasty turn, talking about your unmet needs and your boundaries and labeling people. We are disconnecting from the humanity of other people, disconnecting from our own humanity. This dynamic doesn't serve anyone. It makes total sense that this is the way that you're approaching it, right? That's what we see. That's what we hear all over social media. It's hard to think about how else to do it when you don't see anything else modeled. We need to explore the nuances that get erased when we rely on therapy speak to talk about sex and intimacy. And I see this everywhere, but I see it so much with women who love women because it's more socially acceptable for women to talk about their feelings. And so you've probably been to therapy and you probably have a lot of self-awareness. There's an unexpected dark side to this. The first way that I see therapy speak getting in the way of effective communication about sex and intimacy is what I'm going to call the Flat Stanley. If you grew up around 30 to 35 years ago, you've probably heard of Flat Stanley. He's a cute little cartoon guy, but he's flat. And he lives in a 3D world, so life's kind of hard for him. And what therapy speak does is it Flat Stanleys someone. In other words, it's flattening their human complexity. So we put labels on ourselves and on our partners: anxious, avoidant, narcissistic, insecurely attached, codependent. It's most often done in a way that these labels turn into boxes. We stop being curious about this person and their feelings and their reactions, and we say, oh, you're doing that because you're avoidant, or oh, you're just texting me so much because you have anxious attachment and you need to fix that. The brain loves black and white thinking because the brain likes to conserve energy. So if I can just put something into a simple, this is who you are, and then I can process it, it takes me way less energy to try to understand and stay curious and hold the complexity of the human being in front of me and of the complexity of myself. I am seeing these words get thrown around like they're just fixed personality traits, and that's not the case. A lot of times when someone gets defensive or they have a hard time receiving feedback, or they maybe shut down when things get emotionally intense, or they try to cling to you, all these things are safety strategies that they learned in their life, ways that they are trying to secure safety and belonging, which is what all human beings want. So if these different labels, if they help you understand your dynamics and partnership better, that's awesome. But be careful that you're not using terms to sum up the totality of someone's experience and their way of being, just because it makes it feel easier for you to understand them. Because it feels like shit to have someone project their idea of you and feel like you can't escape that idea, and someone's constantly trying to fit you into a box. You don't want to lose touch with someone's humanity. They are still a person, which leads into communication therapy speak trap number 2, and that is the fixer dynamic. So when you do decide on the set of labels for someone, and their labels are often different than yours, then it's easy to fall into the trap of wanting to fix them. So the way that they're doing things is a problem and they need to do things more like you. So I call this the fixer dynamic. Especially with sex and intimacy, usually one partner feels ready to fix sex and intimacy when it's off track in a couple, and the other partner is usually a bit more hesitant. The one partner that has more urgency in fixing the sex and intimacy, they become the quote unquote expert of the situation. So they read the books, they listen to the podcast, maybe they're in therapy themselves talking about your sexual issues. They diagnose the problem, right? Like, oh, I've read all these books and the problem is you have shame around sex for this reason and you're not good at communicating about it. And if you just fix those things, then our sex life is going to be fine. Or if you just read these books, then you're going to understand me and then that understanding is going to fix our sex life. So within this fixer dynamic, the person who is attempting to do the fixing, they often feel like the fate of their sexual relationship, they are shouldering the weight of it. Like they feel if I don't fix this, it won't get fixed, right? So that comes out as a lot of urgency and a lot of prescribing to the other partner. You need to do this. You need to read this. You need to be more like this. Then one partner often becomes the problem, quote unquote, that needs to be fixed. And nobody likes to feel like the problem. They either feel like you're just blaming them and you're not taking responsibility, which is going to make them feel angry, or they feel like they are the fucked up one and they're going to shame themselves about it, and then they feel like shit. So this dynamic doesn't serve anyone, but it is a way to feel like you're working on it or making progress in this fixer dynamic, but you are not. You're actually just perpetuating these roles in the relationship, and those roles probably led to the sexual disconnection in the first place. This was me. When I was in school for somatic sexology, I myself was struggling in my marriage. Our sex life was not doing great. So I was learning all these things in school and I was like, oh, I just need to apply these to my relationship. And then I would bring them to my wife and she would often express that she felt like a guinea pig or a science experiment, right? I put myself on a pedestal of having the knowledge, and putting myself on this pedestal disconnected me from her because we're no longer on the same level. I had this untrue sense of I'm the expert here. I'm not an expert on anyone else's body. If you find yourself on either end of this dynamic, the fixer or like the problem partner, you need to bring more empathy to your partner's experience. Stop trying to get them to understand your side. You start with the empathy. You extend the olive branch first. Show up with the empathy for their experience first. And that's the hard part of being in a relationship, is having to go first when both people have hurt. So the third way that I see therapy speak sabotaging communication around sex and intimacy is what's called intellectualizing. So basically that just means you thinking about and analyzing and talking about feelings, but not actually feeling the feelings, right? It's the brain's tricky way of thinking, oh, well, I'm doing all this growth. Like, look at all these things I can say. Look at all these words that I can use to describe my experience. Intellectualizing is a tendency that I have. And it's great, right? Because part of staying in my head and analyzing helped me not have so much awareness in my body where my pain is from my trauma history. On one hand, it is really helpful to understand and to analyze, but it's incomplete because there's also the whole processing, the feeling, the physiological effects of emotions in the body. So that intimacy feels more natural instead of the body bracing against it. It's less vulnerable to communicate with therapy speak in ways where you are hiding behind those words. Does that make sense? So, for example, I could say, we never talk about sex and it's because you're avoidant and you need to learn how to process your emotions so that we can have this conversation. And because of my childhood trauma, like I can't deal with avoidant people. My trauma is triggered from this. On the surface, like what you're saying sounds fine, but there's no vulnerability. You're more talking at someone and reporting to them what needs to happen more than inviting a conversation about something as vulnerable as sex and intimacy. When these types of words are our go-to, we actually lose the plot of the communication altogether because they're not precise enough. They're just relying on these terms that come with such emotional baggage and visceral reactions. It derails the conversation, and so we stay often at the surface of the conversation. It's way different if you say, Sometimes I worry that people that I love are going to leave me, and you're the person I love most. So I feel like I have to learn all this stuff and teach you so that we can fix this and you want to stay with me. I feel scared that if I don't take on this big project of like fixing our sex lives, then we'll just keep drifting apart and I'll lose you. And that scares me because I don't want to lose you. That's vulnerable, and I'm not using any therapy speak or labels to box you in or to put a blanket over myself. That is more likely that you'll have a productive conversation about sex and intimacy because you're leading with your heart. Communication skills they're not natural. You're not born with them. They are skills that can be built. Let me show you how to put the humanity back into your communication with the expansive communication framework. It's not more scripts like Mad Lib type therapy scripts or using I statements or holding intense eye contact and going, right? We don't need any of that. When you use the expansive communication, the tension of resentment and judgment and frustration starts to melt away. You start to view your partner as your teammate, and the sexual disconnection is something you can both solve together instead of blaming each other. Because the goal of expansive communication is for both partners or all partners to feel seen and understood and get clarity on what's working, what isn't working, what worked before, when it stopped working, and what you're open to trying in the spirit of teamwork and curiosity. So, expansive communication hinges on 3 things: coherence, allowance, and playfulness. This approach to communication not only creates a new culture in your relationship, but that ripples out to your family, your friends, and your community. And this is how you change culture. Everyone likes to talk about cultural change, but changing culture starts with the culture in your own house. What is your personal culture in your relationships? Because a culture of therapy speak and judgment is not going to change anything. It's not going to make anyone feel good, and it's not going to create better people. So the first part is coherence. What does that mean? There are 2 layers of communication that are happening. There's verbal, what you're saying, and there's nonverbal, what your body is communicating. With therapy speak, we focus on the verbal. I'm saying the words in this order, I'm using these terms, I'm doing it the quote right way, my voice is staying calm, whatever. The body communicates how you're actually feeling on the inside beyond your tone and your fancy words. Especially when it comes to talking about sex, people are often saying one thing with their words, and their body is communicating something completely different. Because we often feel rejected or abandoned. Maybe we feel shame. I was like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this. I should be more healed than this. So we don't communicate the truth of that experience that we're having. With the tension, the shallow breathing, maybe the darting eyes, maybe the lack of eye contact, the leaning forward like this, or the leaning back disengaged, all those body signals are being communicated and registered by your partner, and you're picking up on theirs as well. Often we register these things subconsciously, but it still impacts the way that we're showing up in these conversations. When there's that disconnect between what your body's communicating and what your words are saying, it registers as something untrue, right? So now everyone's nervous systems are on edge. I'm not relaxed. I'm not comfortable. This is not a safe situation for me to express my emotions. When you're feeling defensive, it's pretty hard to think about emotional connection and empathy being your go-to responses. So coherence means that you're syncing up what's happening inside with what you are communicating outside. As in, you accurately express your feelings when you're feeling anxious, when you're feeling scared, when you're feeling loved, when you're feeling judgmental. This is the hardest part that I see couples get stuck in. The second layer of expansive communication is allowance. Especially in the world of therapy speak and self-healing, many people are calling self-suppression emotional maturity. This could look like, I shouldn't let them see me angry. Or I need to handle this on my own. I need to go do some healing and then I'll have this conversation. And people think this is emotional maturity, but it's actually, you're hiding your humanity, right? You're not letting your partner see you. And this doesn't build intimacy, right? You are eroding intimacy when you are hiding your harder emotional feelings from your partner. Letting someone see you and your messiness, that's intimacy. And I know it's scary. That's kind of the point. That risk of showing yourself to someone, that's how intimacy gets built. You being put together in the strong one all the time is only going to make you feel more alone and like no one understands you. But you also have to take responsibility for the fact that you're not giving anyone the chance to understand you. So the last layer of expansive communication is playful practice. Children learn best through play. This has been studied because play allows you to experiment without punishment. In the context of your relationship, you want to bring in playful practice, meaning that you can try things without needing to get them right the first time. You can make adjustments in real time. You can say something and maybe it doesn't land. He's like, ooh, shit. That didn't land the way I thought it did. Let me try that again. You can let awkwardness exist without it meaning like you're failing the conversation or you're doing it wrong. This need to do it right, or this perfectionism, fellow perfectionists, I see you. You don't learn how to communicate better until you try it and you mess up. So if you keep worrying about doing it right, you're not going to try as much. But that means less opportunities for learning and actually getting better at it. So when you communicate with your partner about sex and intimacy, you want to bring coherence, allowance, and playful practice. And this is how you bring the emotion and the vulnerability and the heart back to the conversation. So the expansive communication framework is just one part of my feral connection method, because you won't be able to effectively communicate about sex and intimacy if you haven't taken time to discover what your body actually wants and needs. Because knowing what you don't want is the easiest part, but it doesn't map out a path forward to more connected sex. But it's going to be hard to register what actually feels good and brings you pleasure in your body if you are dissociated from your body from trauma. Whether that's a singular event of trauma, like a sexual assault, or just the ongoing social traumas of homophobia and a sex-negative culture. So when all these pillars build together, sex and intimacy actually feels exciting instead of an obligation that you need to fix or something that you want to just push aside and keep ignoring. So with the feral connection method, hard conversations are still hard, awkward conversations are still awkward, but there's more goodwill assumed. And there's a commitment to deeper connection, not just solving a problem. And when your end goal is deeper connection, the path is much different and you can leave your therapy speak at the door. If this is exactly the nuance that you've been looking for around communication and you're ready to build real life communication skills, I want to invite you to book a connection call with me. You can click the first link below. But if you want to learn more and dive deeper into expansive communication and the other frameworks in the feral connection method, click the second link below because I break it all down for you. Okay, love you, bye.